The night began with laughter, music, and bright colors dancing under the open sky. In a small town where Black families gathered every year to celebrate New Year's Eve together, joy flowed freely, like a familiar song. Children ran between adults holding sparklers, elders clapped to the rhythm of drums, and voices rose in prayer and gratitude for another year survived. It was a night meant for hope, for fresh beginnings, for leaving pain behind and welcoming promise ahead. No one believed this night would become something they would never forget. At the center of the celebration was the town square, decorated with strings of lights and handmade banners reading words like hope, faith, and new beginnings. Black people from nearby streets and villages had come together, dressed in bright fabrics and warm smiles. Food was shared without counting, hugs were given freely, and old disagreements were set aside, at least for the night. The air smelled of grilled corn, spices, and sweet drinks. Everything felt right, safe, and familiar. Among the crowd stood Malik, a quiet but thoughtful man in his early 30s. He had returned to the town after many years away, hoping the new year would help him reconnect with his roots. Beside him was his younger sister, Mia, full of energy and excitement, filming moments on her phone and laughing loudly. For her, this night was magic. For Malik, it was comforting, but something inside him felt unsettled, like a soft warning he couldn't explain. Not far from them, Mama Yara sat on a wooden bench, watching everything with calm eyes. She was one of the oldest women in the community, respected for her wisdom and her stories. Many believed she could sense things others couldn't. While everyone else focused on the countdown, Mama Yara kept glancing at the sky, then at the old clock tower at the edge of the square. Her hands rested tightly in her lap, and every now and then, she whispered words no one could hear. As the night moved closer to midnight, the energy grew louder. Drums beat faster, songs became stronger, and people shouted early New Year wishes to one another. Black families gathered together for photos, smiling wide, ready to mark the moment the year would change. Children were lifted onto shoulders, fireworks were prepared, and phones were raised, waiting to capture the exact second the clock struck 12. But beneath the joy, small things began to feel off. The wind, which had been gentle all evening, suddenly stopped. The music hesitated for just a moment, as if someone had missed a beat. Malik noticed the streetlights flicker briefly, then return to normal. He brushed it off, telling himself it was nothing. After all, it was a night of celebration. Fear had no place here. Mama Yara stood up slowly, her movement catching Malik's attention. Their eyes met across the crowd. There was something in her expression that made his chest tighten. It wasn't panic. It was recognition, like she had seen this moment before in a dream or a story passed down through generations. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but the noise of the crowd swallowed her voice. 10, someone shouted. The crowd joined in, voices rising together.
9, 8,
7. Fireworks were lifted into position. Mia grabbed Malik's arm, smiling brightly. "You're home just in time," she said. "This year is going to be different. I can feel it." Malik forced a smile, nodding, though his eyes drifted back to Mama Yara. She was shaking her head slowly now, her lips pressed together, her eyes fixed on the clock tower. 6,
5,
4. A deep sound echoed suddenly, low and distant, like something heavy moving far away. Only few people noticed.
Most were too caught up in the countdown.
3, 2. The air felt thick, harder to breathe. The drums stopped completely. 1. The clock struck midnight. For half a second, nothing happened. Then everything changed. The lights went out all at once, throwing the square into darkness. Fireworks failed to ignite. The crowd fell silent, confused murmurs replacing cheers. Phones glowed as people tried to understand what was happening. Children clutched their parents. Somewhere in the darkness, someone laughed nervously, trying to break the tension. Then the clock tower rang again. This time, it wasn't the sound of celebration.
It was slow.
Heavy.
Wrong.
Malik felt a chill crawl up his spine. Nia tightened her grip on his arm. Is this part of the show? She whispered. Before he could answer, a strange sound drifted through the square, like a whisper carried by many voices at once. It didn't come from any one direction. It felt like it was everywhere. The crowd grew restless. Some people called out names. Others tried to turn on their phone lights, only to find their screens frozen or dark. Mama Yara's voice finally cut through the confusion. This night was never meant to be celebrated here, she said, loud and clear. Her words landed heavily in the darkness. Malik turned toward her, his heart pounding. What do you mean? Someone shouted. She took a deep breath. There are things this land remembers, she said. Things we chose to forget. Midnight doesn't just welcome a new year. Sometimes it wakes something old. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the square, knocking over decorations and sending banners tearing from their strings. The whispering sound grew louder, closer. People began to panic now, calling out, trying to leave, only to find the streets strangely quiet, blocked by shadows that hadn't been there before. Malik pulled Nia close, his mind racing. This was no power outage. This was no accident. Fear spread quickly, replacing joy in seconds. Black people who had come together in celebration now stood frozen, unsure whether to run, pray, or stay still. From the edge of the square, near the clock tower, a faint shape began to move. Malik's breath caught in his throat as he realized something was stepping forward from the darkness, drawn by the moment everyone had waited for all night. And as the whispering grew into a low hum that vibrated through the ground, one terrifying thought echoed in his mind. Whatever this was, it had been waiting for midnight. And it wasn't finished yet. The darkness felt heavier than it should have been, pressing against everyone's senses as if the night itself had stepped closer. Malik could hear his own heartbeat louder than the murmurs around him. People were calling out names, trying to locate family members in the confusion. Some laughed nervously, still believing this was a mistake or a poorly planned surprise. But deep down, most of them felt it too. This was not normal. Something about this New Year night had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. Nia's fingers dug into Malik's arm. The lights will come back on, she said, more to herself than to him. Her voice trembled, and her phone screen refused to respond no matter how many times she tapped it. Around them, other phones flickered briefly and went dark, as if the night had swallowed every signal. Malik looked toward the clock tower again. Its dark outline stood against the sky like a silent witness, and for a moment, he thought he saw movement near its base. Mama Yara stepped forward slowly, her walking stick tapping against the stone ground. The crowd instinctively parted for her, even in the darkness. Respect ran deep for her, especially among the older Black families who had grown up listening to her stories. Everyone stay where you are, she said firmly. Panic will only make this worse. Her voice was calm, but Malik could hear the strain beneath it. This was not just another story she was telling. This was something she feared. Someone shouted from the back of the crowd that the road lights were out too. Another voice said the power was gone across the whole neighborhood. The sense of isolation grew stronger. The celebration that had brought Black people together moments ago now felt like a trap, holding them all in one place under the open sky. Decorations fluttered weakly in the rising wind, their cheerful messages now torn and unreadable. Malik remembered something his grandmother used to say when he was a child. She would warn him that certain nights carried weight, that time itself could feel different if people ignored the past. He had laughed then, dismissing it as old superstition. Now, standing in the dark with fear crawling up his spine, those words returned with uncomfortable clarity. Mama Yara began to speak again, her voice steady but low. Long before this town was built, before these streets and lights, this land was used for gatherings too, she said. Not celebrations. Remembrances. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the whispering sound in the air seemed to fade slightly, as if listening. Some things were buried without being put to rest. And when people forget, the land remembers. A murmur of confusion spread through the people. Malik felt Nia shift closer to him. What does she mean? She whispered. He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the darkness near the clock tower. That shape he thought he'd seen earlier was gone, but the feeling of being watched remained, sharp and undeniable. From another corner of the square, an older man spoke up, his voice shaking. "We've celebrated New Year here for decades. Nothing like this has ever happened." Mama Yara turned toward him. "Because we were protected," she replied. "By prayers, by respect, by remembering. But over time, people stop listening. They stop asking why." Her words hung heavy in the air, stirring unease among the crowd. The whispering sound returned, closer now, like wind passing through a narrow space. Some people covered their ears. Children began to cry openly, and parents held them tighter, whispering reassurances they weren't sure they believed themselves. Malik's heart pounded as he noticed the ground beneath his feet felt colder, almost damp, despite the dry weather earlier that night. A sudden metallic clang echoed from the clock tower, making everyone jump. It wasn't the sound of the clock striking. It sounded more like something heavy hitting metal from the inside. Malik swallowed hard. "That's not right," he muttered. Nia nodded silently, tears welling in her eyes. Mama Yara raised her hand again. "Listen to me," she said. "Whatever is happening, it feeds on fear and confusion. We must stay together." Her words were meant to calm, but they also confirmed everyone's worst suspicion. This was not a simple power failure. This was something deeper, older, and far more dangerous. Malik felt torn between staying and running. His instincts screamed at him to get Nia out of there, to find shelter, to do something. But where could they go when the streets themselves felt wrong? He looked around at the black families who had shared food and laughter just an hour ago. Now their faces reflected the same question burning in his chest. What had they walked into tonight? As Mama Yara continued speaking, Malik noticed a few elders exchange uneasy glances. They knew more than they were saying. "There are stories we stopped telling," Mama Yara admitted. "Stories about a night when time stood still, when joy turned to warning. This town was spared once. I prayed we wouldn't face it again." Her voice cracked slightly, and that small break in her composure sent a ripple of fear through the crowd. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, sweeping dust and loose decorations across the square. The whispering sound rose into a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. Malik felt it in his chest, in his bones. It was not a sound meant for human ears. Yet somehow they were all hearing it. Near the clock tower, a faint light flickered briefly, not like electricity, but like something breathing. A few people gasped. Malik leaned forward, squinting, trying to understand what he was seeing. The shape returned, clearer now, tall and indistinct, as if formed from shadow itself. It did not rush or threaten. It simply stood there, waiting. "This is why the celebration was interrupted," Mama Yara said quietly. "Midnight is a doorway. And tonight, something crossed over." Nia's voice shook as she whispered, "Can it see us?" Malik didn't know how to answer. The shape didn't have eyes he could see, yet he felt seen all the same. The hum grew louder, filling the square until it was impossible to think of anything else. Somewhere in the crowd, someone began to pray. Another person joined in, then another. Different voices, different words, but the same desperate hope. Malik found himself whispering too, not sure who he was praying to, only knowing he needed strength. The celebration of the new year had turned into a test of faith, memory, and courage. The shape near the clock tower shifted slightly, and the hum deepened. Mama Yara gripped her walking stick tightly, her eyes locked on it. "This is only the beginning," she said. "It has come to remind us of something we tried to forget." As the wind howled and the night pressed closer, Malik realized that whatever had arrived at midnight was not finished with them. The past had reached into the present, and the joyful New Year celebration had become something far more dangerous. The question was no longer whether the lights would come back on. It was whether they would all make it through the night. The hum lingered long after the shape near the clock tower stopped moving. It wasn't loud anymore, but it pressed into everyone's thoughts like a low warning that refused to fade. Malik noticed how people had begun forming small circles, families pulling closer, friends holding hands. The New Year celebration that once felt open and joyful now felt tight and guarded. Even the air seemed different, heavy with something unspoken. From the edge of the square, a young man named Isaiah slowly stepped forward. He was one of the volunteers who helped organize the event, someone everyone recognized. "If this is about the land," he said carefully, trying to keep his voice steady, "then maybe we should leave it. We can go home, wait for daylight." A few people nodded at his words, hope flickering briefly. But Mama Yara shook her head. "Leaving without understanding can make things worse," she replied. "Some doors close only when you face them, not when you run." Her words sent another ripple of unease through the crowd. Malik felt torn. Part of him agreed with Isaiah. Another part sensed Mama Yara was right. Whatever had come at midnight didn't feel like something that would simply let them walk away. Near Malik, Nia noticed an older woman sitting on the ground, trembling. She knelt beside her, offering her jacket. "My name is Ruth," the woman whispered. "I remember a story my grandfather told me. He said there was a new year long ago when the drums stopped suddenly, just like tonight." Nia's eyes widened. "What happened?" she asked. Ruth shook her head slowly. "He never finished the story. He said some truths were too heavy to carry." Malik listened closely, his pulse quickening. Around them, similar conversations were unfolding. Elders whispering half-remembered folktales. Younger people sharing rumors they had once dismissed. Each story was incomplete, but together they painted a picture of something buried deep in the community's past. The African folklore they had grown up hearing around fires and kitchens suddenly felt less like fiction and more like warning. At the far end of the square, Isaiah and a few others tried their phones again. One device flickered to life for a second, showing the time still stuck at 12:01. Then it went black. "It's like time froze," Isaiah muttered. The words sent a chill through Malik. Time was supposed to move forward on New Year's night. That was the promise of it. A fresh start. But here they were, trapped in a moment that refused to pass. Mama Yara began speaking quietly to a small group of elders. Malik caught fragments of their conversation. Words like promise, broken, and forgotten drifted through the air. He sensed there was a decision being weighed, something serious. Nia squeezed his hand. "Whatever they're talking about," she whispered, "it sounds like it involves all of us." Suddenly, a child pointed toward the street leading away from the square. "Look," he said. Everyone turned. The darkness there seemed thicker, almost solid, as if the night itself had piled up at the road's entrance. No one moved to cross it. The unspoken message was clear. Leaving might not be an option anymore. Malik's thoughts drifted to his late grandmother. She used to say that New Year wasn't just about the future, but about making peace with the past. He wondered what peace they had failed to make. What had been ignored for so long that it now demanded attention in such a frightening way? Nia noticed something else. The decorations, once bright and colorful, now swayed in patterns that didn't match the wind. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Malik nodded. It felt like the celebration itself was being slowly undone, each banner and ribbon losing its meaning. The keyword New Year celebration echoed bitterly in his mind. This was no celebration anymore. Isaiah returned, his face pale. "Some of the elders think this started when the old community center was torn down," he said quietly to Malik and Nia. "They built the parking lot over it. That place used to be sacred." Malik frowned. He remembered protests back then, people warning about disturbing the land. He hadn't paid much attention. Now he wished he had. Mama Yara raised her voice again, calling everyone closer. "Listen," she said. "We're being tested, not punished. This is about remembrance and responsibility." Her gaze swept across the black families gathered there, her eyes softening. "Our stories are folktales. They are not just entertainment. They are instructions." Malik felt a lump form in his throat. He had grown up loving African tales, never imagining he might one day be standing inside one. From the clock tower, a soft echo drifted across the square. It wasn't a voice, but it carried the weight of one. Several people gasped and a few stepped back. The shape in the shadows had not moved closer, yet its presence felt stronger. Malik sensed it wasn't rushing because it didn't need to.
Time was already on its side.
Ruth clutched Nia's arm. "If the story continues," she whispered, "someone will have to speak for the past." Nia looked at Malik, fear and resolve mixing in her eyes. "What does that mean?" Malik asked, though he feared the answer. Ruth shook her head. "I don't know. That's the part my grandfather never told." A new tension spread through the crowd as people began to realize that this was not something one person could fix. It involved the entire community, their choices, and their silence. Malik saw guilt flash across faces, including his own. How many warnings had they ignored in the name of progress and convenience? The hum returned, stronger than before, pulsing in slow waves. The clock tower's dark outlines seemed to lean toward them, as if listening. Mama Yara closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with renewed focus. "We must remember together," she said. "But we must be careful. Memory can heal, or it can open wounds." As midnight stretched unnaturally long, Malik felt the weight of the moment settle deep inside him. The terrifying thing that had happened at midnight wasn't just the darkness or the shadow near the clock tower. It was the realization that their future depended on whether they were brave enough to face their past. The wind died down suddenly, leaving an eerie stillness behind. No one spoke. The square felt like it was holding its breath. Malik knew they were standing on the edge of something life-changing, a moment that would redefine their community forever. And as the shadow near the clock tower shifted once more, he understood that whatever came next would demand a choice they were not ready to make yet. The stillness became unbearable, like the quiet before a storm that everyone knew was coming but no one could see. Malik felt sweat on his palms despite the cool night air. The hum faded again, replaced by a strange pressure in his ears, as if the world had tilted slightly off balance. People stopped whispering. Even the children fell silent, sensing the fear in the adults around them. Mama Yara took a slow step forward, closer to the center of the square. The faint glow near the clock tower pulsed once, dim and uneven, like a heartbeat struggling to stay steady. Malik noticed how the elders straightened their backs, as if preparing themselves for something long avoided. The younger ones, including him, watched closely, realizing that whatever happened next would shape how this night would be remembered forever. A sudden breeze rushed through the square, circling them instead of passing through. The decorations lifted and twisted, strings pulling tight before snapping loose and falling to the ground. Nia flinched as one brushed past her face. "It feels like we're being boxed in," she whispered. Malik nodded. The air itself seemed to be closing ranks around them. From the shadows near the clock tower, the shape shifted again, clearer now but still without detail. It didn't rush forward. It didn't threaten. That was the most frightening part. It felt patient, certain. Malik's chest tightened as a thought crossed his mind. What if this thing had been waiting for years? Waiting for the right moment, the right night, when Black people gathered to celebrate new beginnings. Isaiah moved closer to Mama Yara, lowering his voice. "If there's something we need to do," he said, "tell us now." His calm sounded forced, like he was holding himself together by will alone. Mama Yara studied the crowd, her eyes lingering on the children, the elders, the families standing shoulder to shoulder. "There is a story that must be spoken," she said slowly. "But once spoken, it cannot be taken back." A murmur spread through the people. Malik felt Nia's grip tighten on his hand. He realized then that fear wasn't the only emotion in the air. There was guilt too. Regret. The weight of knowing that silence had played a role in whatever stood before them now. Ruth's voice trembled as she spoke up again. "My grandfather said the land remembers names," she said. "Names of people who were wronged. Names of promises broken." She swallowed hard. "He said when those names are ignored for too long, they begin to call back." Her words sent a chill through the square. Malik felt the truth of them settle deep in his bones. The clock tower creaked, a long, slow groan that echoed across the empty streets. The hands of the clock twitched slightly, then stopped again. Still frozen at 12:01. Time refused to move forward, as if waiting for something to be acknowledged. Malik's thoughts raced. Was this what the African folktales meant when they spoke of nights where the past and present met? A young woman near the front began to cry softly. "We just wanted to celebrate the new year," she said. "We wanted joy." Mama Yara turned to her, her expression gentle. "Joy without memory is fragile," she replied. "And tonight, the balance has been disturbed." The shadow near the clock tower stretched outward, thin at first, then wider, like ink spreading across water. It didn't touch anyone, but its presence alone made people step back. Malik felt his heart pounding in his throat. He could barely breathe. Nia whispered his name, grounding him just enough to stay focused. Isaiah raised his voice, trying to steady the crowd. "We can face this together," he said. "Whatever it is." His words sparked a small shift in the atmosphere. People straightened slightly, hands clasped tighter. Malik realized that despite the fear, there was strength here too. A shared history, a shared will to protect one another. Mama Yara closed her eyes and began to hum softly. It was a tune Malik didn't recognize, low and steady. One by one, the elders joined in, their voices weaving together. The sound didn't push the shadow back, but it changed the air, filling it with something warmer, heavier with meaning. Malik felt tears sting his eyes, without fully understanding why. The shadow reacted, pulsing once, then twice, as if responding to the sound. The hum returned, louder now, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. The square seemed to shrink, drawing everyone closer together. Malik felt the earth beneath him tremble slightly, not violently, but enough to be unmistakable. Nia leaned close. "Do you think it's listening?" she asked. Malik swallowed. "I think it's waiting," he replied. "Waiting for the right words, the right memory, the right confession." Mama Yara opened her eyes and stopped humming. The sudden silence felt sharp, cutting. She looked toward the shadow, her voice steady but heavy. "We know why you're here," she said. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Malik's breath caught. This was it. Whatever line they were about to cross, there would be no turning back. The shadow shifted again, closer now, though still keeping its distance. The clock tower groaned once more, louder than before. Dust fell from its stone face, and the frozen hands twitched again. Malik felt the tension coil tighter inside him, every nerve on edge. The celebration of Black people welcoming a new year had turned into a reckoning none of them had planned for. Mama Yara took a deep breath. "There is a truth buried beneath this ground," she said. "And tonight, it demands to be seen." Her words hung in the air, heavy and final. Malik felt the weight of the moment crash down on him. The answers were close now. Too close. As the shadow leaned forward and the hum reached its peak, Malik realized they were standing at the edge of revelation. Whatever came next would either set them free or bind them to this night forever. And as the ground beneath the square seemed to pulse with life, the entire community held its breath, waiting for the moment when the past would finally speak. The ground pulsed again, stronger this time, and a sharp gasp spread through the crowd as several people stumbled to keep their balance. Malik felt it clearly now, not just beneath his feet but inside his chest, like a second heartbeat that didn't belong to him. The shadow near the clock tower reacted instantly, stretching upward as if awakened by something deeper than sound. Mama Yara's words echoed in everyone's mind, and a terrible realization began to settle in. "It's not just buried truth," Ruth whispered, her face pale. "It's buried people." Her words landed heavily, and the air seemed to thicken around them. Malik turned slowly, scanning the faces around him. Shock, confusion, denial. No one wanted to say it out loud, but many had heard similar stories growing up. African folktales about land taken without honor, about voices silenced and forgotten. Stories that were never meant to fade. Before anyone could respond, a deep crack echoed across the square. It came from behind the clock tower, where the old parking lot met the edge of the square. A thin line split the ground, just enough to be seen in the dim glow. People cried out, pulling back in fear. Parents lifted children into their arms. Malik instinctively stepped in front of Nia, his heart racing. Isaiah stared at the crack, his voice barely audible. That parking lot, he said. That's where the old community center stood. Mama Yara closed her eyes slowly, pain etched across her face. And beneath it, she said, was a place of gathering long before that. A place of protection. Her voice trembled. Something sacred was sealed away when it shouldn't have been. The shadow shifted sharply, no longer calm or distant. Its shape rippled, as if struggling to hold itself together. The hum turned uneven, breaking into waves that made Malik's head ache. This wasn't just a reminder anymore. It felt like a demand. The New Year night had crossed into something irreversible. Then came the second shock. A young boy near the front pointed toward the elders. "Why didn't you tell us?" he cried. His words cut through the fear like a blade. Heads turned slowly toward Mama Yara and the others standing beside her. Suspicion crept in, mixing with fear. Malik felt it too, uncomfortable but undeniable. What if some people had known more than they shared? Mama Yara opened her eyes, meeting the crowd's gaze. "Because some truths were carried with shame," she said softly. "And some were buried to protect future generations." Her voice rose slightly. "But silence has consequences." The admission sent a ripple through the square. This wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about trust. The crack in the ground widened a little more, releasing a faint, cold breeze that smelled of damp earth and old stone. Malik felt his stomach twist. The shadow leaned toward the opening, its hum sinking with the pulse beneath the ground. Nia whispered, "It's connected to that place." Malik nodded, unable to speak. Suddenly, a voice echoed, not from the shadow, but from the crowd. "It's calling certain people." Everyone turned to see an elder man clutching his chest, his eyes wide. "I hear my father's name," he said shakily. "I haven't heard it spoken in years." One by one, others murmured similar things. Names. Whispers. Memories rising uninvited. Malik's breath caught when he heard his own grandmother's name drift faintly through his mind. His knees nearly gave out. This wasn't random. The terrifying thing that happened at midnight was personal. Deeply personal. It was pulling at bloodlines, at stories passed down quietly, at unresolved pain woven into family histories. The shadow surged forward slightly, stopping just short of the crack. The ground trembled harder now, forcing everyone to brace themselves. Isaiah shouted, "We're running out of time." The frozen clock hands jerked violently, then stilled again. Still trapped at 12:01. Time refused to forgive them. Mama Yara stepped closer to the crack, her walking stick shaking. "If this continues," she said, "the land will open itself. And what comes out won't be controlled." Her words raised the stakes sharply. Fear turned into urgency. Malik realized they were no longer waiting for something to happen. It was already happening. Nia turned to Malik, tears streaming down her face. "What if remembering isn't enough?" she asked. Malik didn't have an answer. He only knew that the community stood divided between fear, anger, and responsibility. And that division felt dangerous. The shadow reacted again, its form flickering as if weakened or enraged by the tension. The hum rose into a harsh vibration that rattled the metal decorations still hanging nearby. The New Year celebration was completely gone now, replaced by something raw and ancient. African folklore had stepped into reality, and it was demanding action. Mama Yara raised her voice one final time. "Someone here is tied more closely to this than the rest of us," she said. "Someone whose blood and memory are key." A collective gasp followed. Malik felt Nia slowly turn toward him. His chest tightened. The whisper of his grandmother's name echoed again, louder this time. The ground cracked wider with a deafening sound, and the shadow surged upward, towering over the square. Panic threatened to break loose, but no one moved. Every eye searched every face, wondering who among them carried the final piece of the truth. As the hum reached a painful peak and the night seemed to bend inward, Malik realized the story wasn't just about what was buried beneath the ground. It was about who would have the courage to face it. And as the shadow loomed and time stood still, the answer was closer than anyone was ready for. The whisper of Malik's grandmother's name grew clearer, no longer just inside his head but carried on the cold air around him. He felt every eye slowly turn in his direction, the weight of the moment pressing down until it was hard to breathe. Nia's hand trembled in his, but she didn't let go. Malik swallowed, his voice barely steady. "I don't understand," he said. "I didn't know anything about this." Mama Yara stepped toward him, her expression soft but serious. "Knowing is not always about memory," she said. "Sometimes it lives in the blood." The shadow near the clock tower stilled, as if listening closely. The hum dropped to a low, tense vibration, waiting. Malik felt a strange warmth spread through his chest, mixed with fear and sadness. Images he didn't recognize flickered in his mind, faces, hands joined in prayer, drums beating under an open sky. Ruth gasped suddenly. "Your grandmother," she said to Malik. "She used to sing the old songs, didn't she?" Malik nodded slowly. He remembered those nights as a child, half asleep while she hummed melodies that felt older than words. Songs he never learned, only felt. Mama Yara nodded. Those songs were meant to keep the balance. When the community center was destroyed, when the land was sealed, the songs stopped being sung here. The crack in the ground widened just enough to release a soft glow from below. It wasn't frightening now. It felt mournful. The shadow leaned closer, its shape shifting, becoming less sharp, less threatening. Malik took an unsteady step forward, guided by something he couldn't explain. Nia whispered his name, fear and trust mixed in her voice. He looked back at her, then at the crowd. "I don't know what to do," he said honestly. Mama Yara placed a hand on his shoulder. "You remember by feeling," she said. "That is enough." Malik closed his eyes, letting the warmth spread. He began to hum, uncertain at first, then stronger as the melody found its way out. It was the same tune his grandmother used to hum while washing dishes, while rocking him to sleep. The elders gasped softly. Ruth began to cry. One by one, voices joined him. Different words, same rhythm. The hum from the shadow changed, matching the melody instead of fighting it. The ground trembled, not violently now, but gently, like something breathing out after holding its breath for too long. The crack glowed brighter, then slowly began to close. The shadow lowered itself, its shape thinning, softening. As it did, images filled the square, not seen with eyes but felt. Memories of gatherings long past, of Black families praying, singing, protecting one another on that very land. The truth was no longer buried. It was shared. A collective release washed through the crowd, grief and relief tangled together. With a deep, echoing sound, the shadow dissolved into the night air, leaving behind silence. Real silence this time. The hum faded completely. The clock tower groaned once more, and the frozen hands finally moved forward. 12:02, time resumed. A few people collapsed to their knees, overwhelmed. Others hugged, cried, laughed through tears. The lights flickered on suddenly, bathing the square in soft yellow glow. Gasps turned into sobs of relief. Malik opened his eyes, exhausted but steady. Nia threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "You did it," she whispered. Malik shook his head. "We did," he replied. Mama Yara exhaled slowly, leaning on her walking stick. "The land has been heard," she said. "But remember this night." The people nodded, still shaken. The New Year celebration felt distant now, almost unreal, but something deeper had taken its place, a renewed respect for memory, for stories, for truth. As people began to help one another up, Ruth approached Malik. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said softly. Malik smiled faintly, tears burning his eyes. For the first time, the night air felt lighter. Then, just as calm began to settle, Malik noticed something strange. Near the edge of the square, where the crack had been, a small symbol remained etched into the ground. It glowed faintly before fading, but not disappearing completely. Mama Yara saw it too, her expression unreadable. "What is that?" Nia asked quietly. Mama Yara paused before answering. "A mark," she said. "A reminder." She looked up at the clock tower, now ticking normally. Balance must be maintained. Always. Malik felt a chill run through him. Not fear, but awareness. The terrifying thing that happened at midnight was over, yet something lingered. Not a threat, but a responsibility. As people slowly resumed their New Year greetings, laughter returning in cautious waves, Malik understood the final truth. Some stories end. Others stay awake, watching. And as the New Year officially began, Malik knew this night would never truly be over. The square didn't return to celebration right away. People stood where they were, as if afraid that moving too quickly might break whatever fragile peace had settled over the night. The music system remained silent, and no one rushed to turn it back on. Instead, neighbors checked on one another, asking quiet questions, sharing deep breaths, holding hands longer than usual. The new year had arrived, but it asked for stillness before joy. Malik sat on the edge of the fountain with Nia beside him, watching the elders speak softly in a small circle. Mama Yara looked tired, yet lighter, like someone who had finally put down a heavy load. Ruth leaned on her shoulder, both women gazing at the clock tower that now ticked normally, its steady sound strangely comforting. The shadow was gone, the crack in the ground sealed, and yet no one doubted what they had experienced together. Isaiah walked over, rubbing his hands together to warm them. "We'll need to talk about rebuilding," he said quietly. "Not just structures. Trust too." Malik nodded. The words felt right. What had happened at midnight wasn't meant to scare them into silence again. It felt like a warning wrapped in care, a reminder that forgetting had consequences, but remembering together could heal. As people slowly began to leave the square, some heading home while others lingered to help clean up fallen decorations, a calm settled in. Children asked questions their parents didn't rush to dismiss. Elders answered more honestly than before. African folktales that once felt distant were spoken again, not as superstition, but as history with lessons still alive. The New Year celebration had changed its meaning, turning into something deeper and more grounded. Malik walked with Nia toward the streetlights, which now glowed steadily. "I keep thinking about my grandmother," he said. "How she used to say that songs remember us, even when we forget them." Nia smiled softly. "Maybe that's why you could sing," she replied. Malik didn't feel special or chosen. He felt connected. That felt more important. The next morning, sunlight revealed the square looking almost ordinary. But people noticed small differences. Flowers placed near the clock tower. Notes written by hand. Thanking ancestors. Thanking the community. Someone painted over the old parking lot lines, marking the ground with symbols of unity and remembrance. No one argued. Everyone seemed to understand that the land needed care, not control. Mama Yara called a gathering later that week. Not a celebration, not a warning, but a conversation. Black families came together to talk about what had been lost and what could be rebuilt. Plans were made to honor the old community center, to tell its story openly, to teach children why memory mattered. The new year became a turning point, not because of fear, but because of honesty. Malik shared his grandmother's songs with others, learning their meanings piece by piece. He realized the melodies weren't about stopping time or holding back shadows. They were about balance, about listening before acting, about community over convenience. The terrifying thing that happened at midnight had not come to destroy them. It came to wake them up. Nia noticed something else too. The people who had been strangers before now greeted each other by name. They checked in. They showed up. The silence that once lived between neighbors had been replaced by shared responsibility. African folklore was no longer just stories told at bedtime. It was guidance woven into everyday life. As weeks passed, the mark near the clock tower faded until it could only be seen if you knew where to look. Mama Yara said that was how it should be. "Warnings don't need to shout forever," she explained. "They need to be remembered." Malik understood then that the final twist of that night wasn't the shadow or the frozen clock. It was the choice the community made afterward. On the next New Year's Eve, people gathered again in the square. The decorations were simpler, the music softer. Before the countdown, Mama Yara invited everyone to stand together. Malik felt a familiar warmth as voices joined in song, not out of fear, but gratitude. When midnight arrived, the clock moved forward without hesitation. No darkness fell. No hum rose from the ground. Cheers filled the air, genuine and free. Fireworks lit the sky, reflected in smiling faces. Black people celebrated the new year with laughter that felt earned. Malik looked around and felt something settle peacefully inside him. The past had been acknowledged. The future felt open. As the night wound down, Nia squeezed his hand. "Do you think it will ever come back?" she asked softly. Malik thought for a moment. "I think as long as we listen, it won't need to," he said. And for the first time since that terrifying midnight, he truly believed it. The story of that new year became one the community told carefully, without exaggeration or fear. It wasn't about a shadow or a frozen clock. It was about what happens when people forget who they are and how powerful it can be when they remember together. It became a lesson passed down, a reminder that some nights change everything, not by ending joy, but by teaching how to protect it. And so the year moved forward, not untouched by the past, but guided by it. The square remained a place of gathering, laughter, and music, strengthened by truth. The land rested. The people listened. And the new year, once terrifying,